Salvete discipuli. Today we come to the end of the saga. Today's lesson will be the final reading of stories connected to Salvius and Quintus. In the last installment, Salvius was attempting suicide. We're going to see as we pick up the action, the emperor is going to put a stop to that, and we will finally have a sentence in this case. At princeps simulac mortem a Salvio cogitari per ministros cognovit, tribunum militesque domum eius emissit. But the emperor, as soon as he learned, okay, so cognovit is he learned, meaning the emperor learned. What's going to be triggered here momentarily is an indirect statement, namely the substance of what he learned. Now, who he learned it from, per ministros. As soon as he learned through his agents that, and now here's what he learned. He learned literally that mortem, death, and the passive infinitive cogitari, that death was being considered by Salvius. Okay, here's what he did. He sent out an officer and soldiers, domus eius, to his house. Okay, we talked last time about how domum, you don't actually need ad in order to express the concept of sending someone to a house. Now, the reason it's eius here is it's Salvius's house. If the emperor sent someone to his own house, you wouldn't use eius, you would use the adjective, in this case, domum suum would mean he sent someone to his own house. Okay? So again, this indirect statement, literally, when he learned death to be considered by Salvius, that would be the literal translation, but better English, that death was being considered by Salvius. You could also, if you wanted in your translation, you could make this active. You could say, as soon as he learned through his agents that Salvius was considering death, here's what happened. Mandavit eius ut Salvii mortem prohiberent, ipse enim crudelis videri nolebat. Okay. He commanded them. Now, I put the two in parentheses here because this is dative plural. Eius is dative plural. So, like, he gave a command to them that they do something. Ut, that they, literally, that they might stop the death of Salvius. Salvii is genitive. Okay, so the death of Salvius. Now, this literal translation, that they might stop, better English would be just to take it all the way down to, he commanded them to stop the death of Salvius. Ipse enim crudelis videri nolebat. Literally, enim is what we call a post-positive, meaning in a clause like this, it always comes second, even though I'm translating it first, okay? For he himself was not wanting, nolebat. Now, this verb will complete itself with an infinitive. What was he not wanting? Videri. This is a passive infinitive, not wanting to be seen as cruel. Okay? Now, this is in form a passive infinitive. There is, alongside the verb video to see, basically, the passive forms of it are also used as the verb to seem, okay? So instead of was not wanting to be seen as cruel, we could translate this as was not wanting to seem cruel. Milites igitur a tribuno iussi salvium e balneo extraxerunt et deligandis brachiis vulneratis sanguinem suppresserunt. The soldiers, therefore, now the main verb here first is extraxerunt. This is what they did. But we're going to have a clause first. A tribuno iusi, ordered by the officer. So iusi is the past participle of the active verb eubeo. Okay? So remember, the past participle of an active verb is passive. So they were ordered by the officer. What did they do? They dragged Salvius out of the bathtub. Okay, so traxerunt on its own would mean dragged. Traxerunt plus X, dragged out of here, the A, out of the bathtub. They dragged Salvius out of the bathtub, and now anticipating what we have here. This is a gerund, okay, the verbal noun gerund. So by doing something, okay, they did something else, okay. So literally, deligandis brachiis vulneratis, by binding up his wounded arms, okay. Now, these are ablatives, okay? Ablative, when it's hanging in the middle of space, all on its own, without a preposition, you supply something like with, by, or in. So in this case, by is going to be the nice go-to preposition to add. You know, by doing something, here's what they did, okay? But now, this is ablative plural. The reason it's ablative plural, okay, is because arms is plural. We encountered this last time as well. Some weird gerund rules in Latin. When a gerund takes an object, the object imports into the gerund itself both its number and its gender. Okay, so its case is determined by its use as a gerund, you know, by doing something. In this case, by binding up his wounded arms. But then the gerund itself becomes ablative plural because brachiis is plural, okay? And the past participle describing brachiis also is going to have to agree with it, okay? So that's why all of these are ablative plural. So by binding up his wounded arms, they stopped the blood, understood the blood flow. Postridie Ursus Servianus, qui cognitioni praefuerat, sententiam pronuntiavit. The following day, Ursus Servianus, who was in charge of the trial, pronounced the sentence. Okay, people, get ready. We are about to learn what sentence Salvius is going to receive for all of these crimes that now he has been determined that he is guilty of these crimes. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is in the substance of an indirect statement, okay? So that's why we have esse here. Esse is the infinitive to be. So we're going to normalize these proclamations back into a list of statements of things that must be done, okay? So first off, nomen salvii. What must be done to the name of Salvius? Iradendum esse. It must be erased from the list of consuls. Fastis, ablative plural. From the list of consuls. Salvius had been consul, and now his name must be erased from the list of consuls as punishment for what he has done. What else is going to happen? Bonorum eius partem publicandam, partem filio tradendam. Now, esse doesn't exist here. Let me go back for a moment, okay? Esse doesn't exist, but it's going to be understood, okay? So in all these lists of proclamations where we have these gerundive forms, okay, just like Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. In this case, eradendum esse must be erased, okay? So we understand the esse to still be here, and that's why I'm going to put the word be in parentheses. So bonorum, of his goods, but partem, a part of his goods, publicandam, must be confiscated. Now, understood bonorum eius again, a part of his goods, filio tradendam, must be handed over to his son. Okay, so Salvius has a son, and so his punishment is, let's imagine Salvius owns $1 million, just to keep the numbers easy. Okay, what this comes down to is $500,000 are going to be confiscated by the Roman Empire for their purposes, but $500,000 are going to be given to his son, basically because, after all, the son does deserve some portion of this inheritance. And here it is, people. Here is the ultimate sentence. You've been waiting for this ever since you learned what a nasty guy Salvius is. He's a guy who kills slaves just for being sick. And here it is. Salvium ipsum, quinque annos relegandum. Salvius himself must be exiled for 5 years. What? After all of this is the punishment of Salvius. So like 5 years from now, Salvius can come back. I mean, he's got to go live somewhere else in the Roman Empire for 5 years, okay? And when that's done, he gets to come back. His son still has half of his estate. His son will presumably help take care of him. Yes, Salvius's name is no longer on the list of consuls, but for everything that happened, Salvius is going to basically have 5 somewhat uncomfortable years living in exile, and then I guess he gets to come back, and it's as if none of this ever happened. So, quinque annos, this is accusative of time, okay? Accusative plural, annos. And so when you have a unit of time with a number in the accusative, you translate it as for a certain amount of time. Ille egitur, vulneribus sanatis Roma discessit. That one, therefore, his wounds having been healed. Okay, so this is an ablative absolute, literally with his wounds having been healed. So they let him get better, because he had these wounds in his arms from trying to kill himself. They let him heal from that, and then he has to go out in his exile. So he left Rome. Final sentence of the saga. At princeps quinto favorem suum ad honores policitus est. Simul autem eum monuit ne, nimis elatus vel superbus fieret. But the emperor promised. Policitus est is the perfect tense of the deponent verb policior. So he promised. What did he promise? He promised favorem suum. He promised his favor, quinto, dative, to Quintus. Now, what's left over here, ad honores, okay? Literally, to honors. Now, I'm not going to translate this otherwise than this literal translation. He promised his favor to Quintus to honors, okay? But I'm going to tell you what it means, okay? This idiom means that the emperor is going to promote Quintus to some pretty high up governmental post because of Quintus's role in this whole thing, okay? So Quintus, at the end of our story, we know that he is himself independently wealthy, but now we learn that he is going to be able to take on some very nice governmental job there in Rome. And one more thing then happens. The emperor simul autem. At the same time, however, what did he do? Eum monuit. He warned him. Okay, so the emperor warned Quintus. What's left? Ne is the equivalent of ut non. Okay, so when you want to say so that not, okay, or in order that not, you don't say ut non, you say ne. So he warned him so that he might not become. Fieret is the imperfect subjunctive. So with ne, he warned him so that he might not become. Now, better English, you can say warned him not to become. Okay? Warned him not to become. Not to become what? Nimis elatus. Too elated. Okay, so in other words, okay, Quintus, you're going to have this great job. Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Yeah, settle down, young man. Don't get too elated, okay? Yes, it's a big thing. Don't get too elated, but also vel superbus, or arrogant, okay? So the emperor is telling Quintus, you are a young man. You do now have a very important post. Don't think too much of yourself. Just do your job well. Don't be arrogant. And we can now imagine Quintus will spend his life serving the Roman Empire in official capacities. We have every reason to believe Quintus will settle down. He'll have a family. And so the saga of Caecilius est pater and so on, Caecilius is the father, the first sentence that we read of this story, has now come to an end. Quintus indeed will have a very good life. Clemens is still having a wonderful life, owning and running that glass shop back in Alexandria. And so with this, the story has come to a close.